What is up, you all? What is up, you all? Thank you so much for tuning in to the Left-Handed Leftist podcast. You all, I am so excited for today. We have an amazing episode. We're going to be talking about ICE. We're going to be talking about not only the recent Minneapolis ICE shooting, but we're going to be talking about a Maryland woman who was actually abducted by ICE as well, who was a U.S. citizen. We're also going to be talking about legislation that's actually happening in Maryland that is being sponsored to make it so that ICE cannot serve, or ICE agents cannot serve as police officers within the state of Maryland. So you all, we have a lot of different articles, a lot of different news clips to watch, and it's going to be a really exciting and informational episode. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it, you guys. So let's start with our first article from Al Jazeera. So also our first article is from Al Jazeera. It's titled "Abolish ICE. Tens of thousands in Minneapolis across the U.S. protest killing. Protesters demand justice for Renee Nicole Good, a mother of three shot dead by an ICE agent in Minneapolis this week." And this article is by Al Jazeera staff and news agencies. It says tens of thousands of people have marched through in Minneapolis to protest the killing of a woman by an immigration and customs ICE agent. Part of more than 1,000 rallies planned nationwide this weekend against United States President Donald Trump's militarized anti-immigration push. The protests on Saturday came after a fatal shooting of Renee Nicole Good, a 37-year-old mother of three, on January 7th, which led to outrage and accusations of the Trump administration's lies about what transpired, as video appeared to clearly contradict official statements. The boisterous crowd chanted Good's name and slogans such as, quote, "Abolish ICE," and, quote, "No justice, no peace, get ICE off our streets." Minneapolis leaders urged demonstrators to remain peaceful. Indivisible, a social movement group, said hundreds of thousands of demonstrations were scheduled in Texas, Kansas, New Mexico, Ohio, Florida, and other U.S. states. Quote, "ICE's violence is not a statistic. It has names, families, and futures attached to it, and we refuse to look away or stay silent," Leah Greenberg, Indivisible's co-director, said in a statement. Stephen Eubanks, 51, said he felt compelled to attend a protest in Durham, North Carolina, just because of what he called, quote, "horrifying killing of Good by an ICE agent, Jonathan Ross." Quote, "We cannot allow it," Eubanks told the Associated Press news agency. Quote, "We have to stand up." Senior Trump administration officials have justified Good's killing, saying she, quote, "weaponized her vehicle and threatened the life of the ICE officer who shot her dead." But video footage from the scene showed Good attempting to drive away before being shot. The incident has renewed scrutiny of Trump's push to deploy heavily armed law enforcement agents to carry out an anti-immigration crackdown across the U.S., with local authorities demanding that ICE agents leave their cities. The killing of Good came as the U.S. Department of Homeland Security pushes ahead with what is called its largest immigration enforcement operation in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis. And let's go ahead and pause there. You all, I just want to start on by really talking about this murder. So this was caught on camera, and if you've seen the video, you can clearly see that Renee Good was trying to leave the scene, and Renee's wife has actually come out and talk about how Renee was there to join the protests against ICE and what they have been doing to communities, tearing families apart, really acting as the arm of fascism within the country as well. And I want to also say she was exercising her First Amendment right, which she has every right to do. And I want to say one thing that I don't really hearing being talked about too much is that a lot of these shootings that are happening at protesters can be seen as a violation of someone's First Amendment rights, because it shows that everyone should be scared to even go out and voice their opinions against ICE and to stand up for their neighbors and their communities as well. Also, that The footage of the murder, if you look at it, is contradictory to what the Trump administration is saying. As the article stated, the Trump administration is trying to say that the officer was in their right to shoot Renee, but upon looking at the video, and we know how the government, when we have police shootings that happen all the time, the government loves to come to the public and say, don't believe your lying eyes. You do not know what you see. Let us tell you what you see. But if you look at the actual video, we can see what the truth is that this officer did not fear his life. He was not doing this in any form of self-defense. This was a state sanctioned killing, or I guess you could say a federal sanctioned killing. And then I also want to talk about the protests that have been happening. I mean, this is amazing to see so many people coming out and protesting. And then I hope that with people protesting, that it continues, but also builds up into a movement of people calling for actual ending of ICE funding. Because one thing that I know, Muriel Bowser, the mayor of DC, has recently said that if people are really unhappy with what is happening in Minneapolis and all across DC and other urban areas when it comes to ICE, that the really only thing that we can do is defund ICE.
If we don't want ICE in our communities, we have to stop funding ICE.
DC Mayor Muriel Bowser speaking out against ICE in DC and cities across the country after being asked about the killing of an unarmed woman by an ICE agent in Minneapolis.
What I saw, to me, it just is reflected when you have people who are unaccustomed to urban policing trying to police in an urban environment. And what it looked to me like very bad, and I'm not a police officer, I'm not in law enforcement, but what I saw was completely avoidable, and a woman died. ICE is patrolling American cities. If we don't want that, the Congress has to stop funding ICE, because thousands of agents who are untrained to police in urban environments are on our streets.
So that we do not have ICE agents carrying on about as they are currently. Let's go ahead and get back into the article and kind of hear what they're saying about people wanting to get rid of ICE as well. So the article continues, says, ICE out for good. Many of Saturday's protests were dubbed, quote, ICE out for good, with organizer Indivisible saying the rallies aim to, quote, mourn the lives taken and shattered by ICE and demand justice and accountability. In Minneapolis, a coalition of migrant right groups called for a demonstration at Powderhorn Park, a large green space near the residential neighborhood where the deadly shooting occurred. They said the rally would call for a, quote, end to deadly terror on our streets. Reporting from a rally in Minneapolis on Saturday afternoon, Al Jazeera's Manuel Rapallo said the protesters have been expressing outrage, but overwhelmingly, we hear people say they're here to demonstrate peacefully. Quote, we're also hearing a lot of calls for justice. What I'm not hearing is too much optimism that there will be justice in this case, Rapallo said, referring to Good's killing. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, who demanded the ICE leave the city after the deadly incident, said on Saturday that 29 people had been arrested overnight as police responded to continued protests. Frey stressed that while most protests have been peaceful, those who damage property or endanger others will be arrested. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara said one officer was injured during the protest response. Meanwhile, 3 U.S. lawmakers representing Minnesota attempted to tour an ICE facility in Minneapolis federal building on Saturday morning, but were told to leave after initially being allowed to enter. U.S. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, Kelly Morrison, and Angie Craig accused ICE agents of obstructing members of Congress from fulfilling their duty to oversee operations there. Quote, they do not care that they are violating federal law, Craig said after being turned away. So, you guys, as we wrap up the first article there, you all can already hear and see that there are major disagreements between what local government is saying and what federal government is saying. What the federal government is saying is that this was correct and proper, what the ICE agent did, while as local authorities, the mayor, and people who actually watched the video are saying the complete opposite. They're saying that this was a murder and that this was not justified at all on behalf of the ICE agent. And then I do love that this is being paired with calls to get ICE out of communities for good. I do think that there needs to be some conversation of what that means and what that looks like. Is that all the way abolishing ICE? Is that heavily regulating them? What are the calls that the organization and activists are actually calling for as well? And I want to also touch on people saying that there is no accountability. The sad thing is that this reminds me a lot of police officers killings, because a lot of times with police officers there are no accountability, and I say a lot of times it's 9 times out of 10 we see that for some reason in this country it is easier for citizens and residents to believe the words of police officers than it is to believe the words of an actual video that they're watching, believe the actual residents and community members who are actually giving their firsthand account of what happened. So while I am not optimistic that something will actually happen, I am always pessimistically hopeful that we actually receive justice. And the problem is that when you have these moments where people do receive justice, where you can kind of say the in the George Floyd, Derek Chauvin trial that there was justice. The problem is that these are not systematic changes; that they are often one-off moments of justice rather than actually being a systematic change of the system as a whole, so that we see the behavior being stopped rather than just that one person being dealt with. But with that, we can go ahead and jump into our next article, which is brought to us by NBC Washington. So I just want to stop there real quick. This was something that was always going to happen the moment that the Trump administration announced that they're ramping up ICE detentions and ICE arrests. We knew that this means that when you have such a ramping up in a money dump into this sort of tactic, the sort of jump out and just arrest people kind of tactics, that you're going to have the consequence of American citizens also being arrested too. And I want to say that this is not the first time that we're hearing about it. And for all of the American citizens who were thinking that, oh, it's not going to affect me because I'm a U.S. citizen, I'm not an undocumented person. The thing is that if they're going to ramp up any type of law enforcement, any type of police, ICE, actual surveillance state within the country, that means that you're also going to get surveilled, which means also American citizens are going to be swept up in it just as much as undocumented people. And you see that here where you have a person who they'll say who has a U.S. birth certificate that was submitted to ICE, but also to reporters that they have seen saying that she is a legal U.S. citizen. But you also have the combination of racial profiling that do say is someone who looks like a Latino American. You also have the fact that ICE isn't discriminating who they are picking up, whether you're a U.S. citizen, whether you're not. The thing is that they are picking you up first and then just claiming that you're undocumented after. And you see that this is not going, it's already happening. It's tearing families apart, and it's creating situations where people are scared to leave their homes. The unfortunate part is that you don't even see this being we're trying to remove criminals off the streets, or whatever kind of made up excuse a lot of times that they use when ramping up the police state within our country. Is you see people who are business owners, people who are just like regular everyday people who live their entire lives and even can be U.S. citizens, getting picked up and deported to countries that either they've never been to or they were there once as a child. So we're gonna just, as we keep watching, just listen to the story and hear the similarities that you probably hear of other people, not just in the state of Maryland, but throughout the country, who are going through these same experiences. So I want to address that part real quick. You literally have not only the abduction of a U.S. citizen by ICE, you also have them now withholding her from receiving communication with her lawyer, or be able to basically defend herself in court about this either. And we see that the Trump administration, and particularly the Department of Homeland Security, led by Kristi Noem, has been acting erratic when it comes to actually how they go about quote unquote law enforcement, which is really just pick up, grab as many people as possible, charge as many many people as possible and make deportations happen as quick as possible. And it just is mind-boggling when you think about what the Trump administration is doing around the world, especially in Venezuela. When you have the Trump administration talk about how they do not want undocumented people in the country, why they do not want immigrants within the country. At the same time, we are literally going to war and kidnapping Venezuela's president so that we can quote steal their so that we can steal their oil, without the mindset to think that if we are causing destruction and mayhem in Venezuela, where do we think people are going to go? They're going to come to the United States, especially because the United States does all this boasting and bragging about how we are the shiny city on the hill, how we are the land of prosperity. Come and get your American dream. We advertise to people that we are the best country for people to go to who are facing hardships, and then we complain that people are coming here. And you cannot have it both ways, especially when you look at the US continue to meddle in other countries' affairs. We are creating a situation where people have to leave their country, and when they leave their country, they're going to go to the closest place to them that actually talks about how they can provide them a second chance at life, which is the United States. So if the United States would actually like to cut down on the immigration numbers, what we really would do is remove ourselves from a lot of other countries in creating turmoil and regime change. And what we would do is remove a lot of the sanctions that we have on these countries as well, so that people are able to stay in the countries that they were born in and prosper there. But instead, as we see what's happening in Venezuela, what's happening in Gaza and all over the world, the U.S. continues to put massive amounts of money behind militarization, colonialism, and breaking apart other countries. So let's go ahead and finish out the video here. So you guys, as you can see, the Department of Homeland Security is going to continue their talking points that anyone that they abduct is a undocumented person, that they do not have the right to be in the country. You could show them your ID. You could even show them, as we see here, your birth certificate, and they will still say that we should not believe our lying eyes. So you all, again, as we go into the next article, I just want you to remember that this is something that while yes, this is majorly and playing a heavy part in affecting the undocumented and the immigrant populations within the country, that the issue of quote unquote law enforcement, and the reason why I do quotes when I say law enforcement, is that a lot of times, or 9 times out of 10, again, they're not acting as a protector of the weak, protector of communities in this what we call public safety. What they're actually doing is acting in most parts like mobs, like modern day mobs and gangs that just have the backing of the government and the backing of the state. And a lot of times you see that when these heinous acts, as the first article, the shooting of Renee Good, whether you have it as ICE kidnapping a U.S. citizen, whether you have police shooting unarmed Black people as they do for decades and centuries, you do not see those same institutions like police, ICE, the FBI, and different law enforcement agencies coming out and saying and denouncing their own. A lot of times what they do is that they will cover each other and try to act like, oh wow, no, this wasn't nothing, or it's just one bad apple, and not discuss it as if it is a systematic issue that we have within law enforcement, who they target and how they treat people based on your race, your ethnicity. So let's go into our third and final article here to really talk about what's happening in Maryland that is causing somewhat of a stir, and about how there's one lawmaker is talking about stopping ICE agents from being able to hold other state law enforcement roles. So our last article here is from WTOP News. It is titled "Maryland Lawmaker Proposes Bill to Bar Certain ICE Officers from State Law Enforcement Jobs." And this article is by Kate Ryan. It says Maryland State Delegate Boafo is proposing legislation designed to bar some sworn U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers from working for state police agencies. Boafo told WTOP he's proposing the quote Icebreakers Act of 2026, which would disqualify ICE officers who signed up to work for the agency as of January 20th, 2025 from gaining employment in Maryland state law enforcement jobs. Asked why those officers should be prevented from working for Maryland agencies such as Maryland State Police, Maryland Transportation Authority Police, Maryland National Resources Police, and other state law enforcement divisions, Boafo pointed to the tone of the current ICE recruitment effort, saying, quote, there's a moral debate at the center of it, and it's playing before our very eyes. Quote, if you are somebody who sat there and watched TV and said, I like what they're doing and I want to go join them in this fight to separate and tear families apart, we don't want you in Maryland, Boafo said. Boafo cited concerns about the accelerated pace of hiring for ICE officers, saying that in Maryland, quote, we want to make sure we have folks of principle who are joining us, not folks who want to tear families apart. The Department of Homeland Security has posted hiring promotions on social media. One shows the interior of a van with the caption, quote, want to deport illegals with your absolute bros? A click on the ICE recruitment site leads to a FAQ page that states, quote, ICE is looking for individuals with integrity and courage. ICE is interested in hiring law enforcement personnel who aspire to the highest standards of performance, professionalism, and leadership. Shootings involved ICE officers in Maryland, Minnesota, and Portland in recent weeks have prompted protests and questions about the strategies and tactics used by ICE officers. Boafo said his bill does not prohibit ICE officers from working in other areas of state government, just state law enforcement positions. It would also not apply to officers who worked for ICE prior to January 20th, 2025. So, you all, let's take a real quick pause right there. It's some things that I do want to note from this. One, I want to say that this is, in my mind, a good piece of legislation. It is good because if we look at the people who have been signing up for these jobs at ICE, you are talking about a lot of people who are doing it, one, for the money. Two, you have a lot of people who are taking out their personal hate. You have people who have anti-immigrant sentiment, racism, and things like that, or people who feel sometimes weak in their personal lives and feel like, oh, this is how I can flex some kind of authority. You see a lot of people, and this isn't just particular to ICE officers. You have a lot of people who were bullied as children. You have a lot of people who may have a lot of insecurities and things who go into these law enforcement military roles because it allows you to walk around with a gun and you can be a quote unquote hero in some people's eyes. And that's why I do stress everyone get mental health care, because you have a lot of officers who use their role as a police officer to boast their own ego that they may or may not have. I want to change that up. So but the one part that I do want to kind of criticize about this legislation is that this is not new. It is not as if the ICE only became a problem when you had this huge hiring spree of ICE officers. ICE has been a problem just as all other forms of law enforcement have been problems. I mean, you can think back to the borders and customs officers who were seen whipping immigrants who are coming across the border. You look at law enforcement officers, whether they be Maryland State Police or local police within Prince George's County and Baltimore City, who have been under multiple federal decrees where the federal government actually has to come in and monitor the police department. You look at Prince George's County, where the delegate represents. You have the local police, which have been under consent decrees by the federal government because of so many instances of excessive force, shootings, murders, killings. You have, and just the overall tone of the police department, where there's been people who come out and talk about the racism within the police department, where officers don't even feel comfortable coming up and speaking about how other officers are treating each other. So while I understand the intent of the legislation, I want to also say that the legislation, in my opinion, doesn't go far enough, because when you look at the people who historically have joined these law enforcement agencies, they are the people who want to abuse their power. And even for the small minority of people that we see who go in, who are the quote unquote good cops, the problem is you can be a good cop, but if you go into a bad system, a lot of times that system is going to corrupt you. Now, you may not be an officer who's going to do the killing, who's going to do the shooting. You may not be the person beating up just everyday civilians and people, but what you may do is you may not talk about it. You may not come up and speak out about it for one, fear of your own job and financial security, but also fear of your own personal safety, because we've seen and heard about a lot of times when officers do speak up and say something, not only are they fired, they also face retaliation and targeting in the field with their fellow officers as well. So I think this really does point out that we need a deeper conversation, not just about officers at this moment, but talk about the actual system that we are putting people in when they become law enforcement for the not just the country, but or not just in Maryland, but also throughout the country. So let's continue with the article. It says that asked about whether he believes the bill could withstand a legal challenge, he said, quote, employment discrimination and employment probation law is very clear. There is a list of protected classes. He said police officers and federal agencies would not fall under those categories. Boafo, who represents a district in Prince George's County, home to thousands of current and former federal workers, said he understands the financial incentive of the $50,000 signing bonus offered as of August 2025. Quote, my district in particular has been hit really hard by federal worker layoffs. Prince George's County as a whole has been hit hard, he said. But he emphasized the impact an accelerated ICE enforcement has had on communities. Quote, people are frightened to go outside of their house. People are frightened to go to the grocery store, he said. Boafo said in crafting the bill, he talked to law enforcement agents who served as ICE officers and said he expects to have other lawmakers sign on to support the bill. The Maryland General Assembly session starts January 14th, and WTOP has reached out to the Department of Homeland Security for comment. So, you all, before we wrap up here, one thing that I do want to note is that while I understand and sympathize and while I sympathize and am empathetic of what is currently happening in the moment, and I've realized that this is a very scary time for not just undocumented people, immigrants, people who are perceived to be undocumented or immigrants. I also want to say too is that in this moment where we are recognizing the harms that law enforcement agencies bring, we also need to recognize that Black Americans have been facing this for decades on centuries in this country as well. It has been multiple times that we have felt scared to go outside, scared to get pulled over, scared to even interact with someone who could be even a security guard at the mall, because a security guard at the mall carrying a gun or even not carrying a gun could be the end of a Black person's life just because that officer at that time was having a bad day. So while we talk about abolishing ICE, while we talk about changing a system, while we talk about making sure that the people who are hired to quote unquote protect the public, we want to also make sure that we are doing the same when it comes to local police officers and who is actually policing our communities as well, and making sure that the people in charge of keeping our community safe actually do that and not just use this job to feel like a big strong hero and feel like they can just do whatever they want because the local police and ICE and other law enforcement agencies have done, just giving people a gun and a badge and say, go out there and have a fun time. So with that, you all, I want to thank you all so much for listening today. Whether you were listening on a podcast format or whether you're watching the video on YouTube, thank you all so much. It is because of all of you all that I'm able to continue to do this. So please remember, like, share, and subscribe. I'm so excited for later on this year with the Maryland General Assembly session starting this week. As we said earlier, we're going to have a lot of conversations with different lawmakers, with different activists and organizations that are putting up legislation. We're going to be talking to candidates this coming election season. You all, I am excited for what's coming, and we are also going to be furthering our conversation here on immigration. We're doing some future episodes when it comes to Venezuela, when it comes to immigration enforcement, and when it comes to also policing within the country as well, but also within the city of Baltimore. You all, I am so happy to be here with you all this year in 2026. You also remember, please, to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast, but also on our YouTube page as well. Please rate us 5 stars, give us a like, and hit that notifications bell so you can get alerted about every time, not when we drop a full episode, every time when we drop a teaser episode, but also the most important part, when we drop our full episodes on Wednesdays at 7 o'clock in the morning. You all, thank you so much, and I'll see you here next time on the Left-Handed Leftist.